I was about 17 years old when all this happened. My brother Noel was working the overnight shift at a convenience store in town, and I went with my friend Tom to visit him. We entered the shop around midnight and found him sitting behind the counter looking bored. The well-lit store was well stocked, full of mostly junk food and soft drinks. I noticed just inside the entrance that a $1 coin was sitting on the polished floor. It was gleaming and looked brand new. Reaching down, I tried to pick it up off the floor and found it wouldn't come up. What the hell? Tom pushed me out of the way and tried to pick it up himself and found the same thing. It was stuck to the floor. Noel burst out laughing from behind the counter. "Oh man, you guys are so gullible. People have been falling for that all night." "What did you do?" "Super glue it to the floor." We sat with him behind the counter and talked for a while, waiting for my other friend Brad to show up. He was supposed to bring a board game that he had found in his basement. Every once in a while a customer would come in, and we would try not to laugh when they attempted to pick up the coin unsuccessfully. Some would give up right away, but others got extremely frustrated and would pull out their car keys or use their fingernails to try to pry it up from the floor. Part of me couldn't help but wonder if Noel was going to get into trouble when his boss came in the morning and found the coins still fastened securely to the floor. Finally, Brad came in with a backpack and a dusty box in his hands. It was a black cardboard box, ripped and cracked at the corners. I noticed the bag he was carrying was clinking as well, like it was full of glass bottles. The box containing the board game had faint writing on it that looked medieval and archaic. It read, "Dungeons and Darkness." "That's weird. I've heard of Dungeons and Dragons, but not Dungeons and Darkness," I said to Brad, after we had exchanged greetings. "Yeah, same here. We were tearing apart the basement doing renovations, and we found the box under the stairs. It was in a burlap sack with these really old bottles of Coca-Cola." He opened up his backpack and pulled out several tall glass bottles with the distinctive feminine curves of Coke containers. But there was no writing on them. "Are you sure these are Coca-Cola? It doesn't say it on the bottles." "I'm pretty sure. Anyways, I'm gonna drink one and see how it tastes." Tom, Noel, and I laughed and tried to convince him that was a terrible idea. The bottles looked like they were from a century ago. His house was built in the early 1900s, so there was no way of knowing when they were boarded up under the stairs in his basement. "I had them in the fridge. Come on, guys. Don't you want to try and see what 100-year-old Coke tastes like?" We were young and bored and stupid, so we agreed. He handed each of us a bottle, and I felt the coolness of it in my hands. Holding it up, I looked at the liquid inside the bottle. It had a vague vermilion shade to it at the edges, when held up to the fluorescence. We each opened up our bottles and took a sip. It was sweet and bubbly, like a soft drink, but not quite. The sugary beverage was cool and refreshing. It tasted delicious despite its age, but was nothing like Coca-Cola. "See? What did I tell you? Man, that's good." Brad looked very satisfied with himself. "Wanna set up this board game?" Noel asked, sipping his drink. We got the game board laid out and picked our characters. I was a paladin, Noel chose a barbarian, Brad picked an elven archer, and Tom decided upon a dwarf after a long period of deliberation. Each character had a game card which showed their abilities and a special move which could be used only once per game. We also received a starting weapon, in my case a sword. The starting location on the map, where we would begin the game, was, interestingly enough, labeled Shop. It was about then that we noticed there were no dice with the game. The instructions were also missing. There was no clear direction on how to start playing, other than to put our game pieces on the start location in the shop. The only other items in the box were a stack of cards, which Brad had shuffled and set beside the game board. There was nothing to do but draw a card from the stack, so I did, and read it out loud. A visitor arrives at the shop. I flipped the card over and looked at the back of it, thinking there had to be more, but there wasn't. Taking a long sip of my syrupy sweet drink, I looked up at the sound of a bell ringing above the door as it opened. My mind was spinning as I gazed confusedly around the room. Bolting up from my chair, I gasped. It was like we had been teleported somehow to a shop in a medieval fantasy world. Potions and vials lined the shelves on the walls. Herbs hung from the ceiling as well as furs and dried meats. Instead of fluorescence, the store was now dimly lit by flickering torches and candlelight. "Oh man, what was in that drink?" I asked Brad, feeling dizzy. He was standing up too, and all of us were looking around the room in a delirious confusion. "Lasset, what sort of black magic spellery did you boys cast on this here gold piece to bind it to the floorboards like this?" The customer at the door was on his hands and knees trying to pull up the coin from the floor. "What the hell is going on?" Noel looked extremely worried. The man on his hands and knees by the door eventually stood up, looking slightly embarrassed. He was wearing long blue robes and a floppy, pointed hat. He had a long white beard, and carried a tall wooden staff with a large jewel set into the top of it. His bushy eyebrows went up as he looked over at all of us staring at him. "Why, I suppose it's some sort of jest, then." A deep-throated laugh poured out of him then. It was a good-natured laugh and he walked towards us with a wide grin on his face. "Oh, you boys should think yourselves quite clever, pulling one over on a wizard such as myself. I am quite a prominent figure around these parts, you should know." We all stared at him, our jaws hanging down. "Right. Well, then. I'll take 3 red potions, if you don't mind. I've got the silver for it, don't worry." I looked to see behind the counter were rows and rows of vials containing potions of various colors and shades. Picking up a red one, I saw it had a heart shape on the front of it. "Let me guess, healing potion?" I asked him, feeling as if I was in a dream, but knowing somehow that I was not. "You should know, you're the shopkeeper, aren't you? Of course, red potion for healing, green for mana, blue for, what am I telling you for? Here, give me those, I've got a date with a dragon and I can't be late for it." He slammed his silver pieces on the wooden counter, and grabbed 3 potions for himself and stomped out angrily, muttering under his breath. We all stayed silent for a minute after he left, still in complete shock. "What the hell was in those drinks, Brad?" Tom finally shouted. All of our bottles stood empty, and I immediately regretted finishing it so quickly. But it had been pretty tasty. "Look, guys, our pieces moved on the game board." Noel was staring at the board and he was right, the pieces moved forward to the next location. "It says dungeon entrance," I noted, looking at the board. "I don't like the sounds of that." Looking up, I saw a wooden sign which was swinging at the back of the store, as if it had just been struck by a strong wind. It was squeaking, hanging from a pair of rusty chains. I could have sworn it hadn't been there a second ago. "Dungeons and Darkness," it read. An arrow was pointing down a staircase which had also recently appeared at the back of the store. The cards were missing from the game board. I mentioned this to the other guys. "I get the feeling it's the only way out of here," I said, pointing at the game board. At the very end, at the top of the board, after the dungeons, was a tile marked finish. "Nope. Not going down those stairs. Not doing it. I'm gonna stay right here until these century-old hallucinogenic soft drinks wear off." Suddenly the entire room began to shake, and the walls started to move in towards us, as if they were on rollers. They began to close in on us, and the room shrunk smaller and smaller, turning it from a square-shaped room into a hallway. The wood-beam walls crushed the shelves in the way, and bottles fell to the floor, glass vials breaking and shattering. "Oh, hell. I don't think we have a choice, guys," I yelled, running towards the stairs. Tom and Brad ran after me, and reluctantly Noel came too, grabbing a few red potions quickly as he left the area behind the counter. I watched as the entire shop was crushed, and the walls closed off the door behind us, leaving us at the top of the strange staircase. Stone steps led downward and torches lined the rough-hewn brick walls. We made our way down and eventually reached the lower level. Weapons were hanging from a rack down there waiting for us. A sword with a red cross on the hilt for the paladin. A large double-sided steel axe for the dwarf. A bow and quiver of arrows for the elven archer. And a big awl club for the barbarian. "I don't know how the hell you're going to carry that thing, Noel," I said, looking over to him. But then I stopped short when I saw Noel had grown by about 3 feet and was now a towering hulk with wide shoulders, wearing furs and leather boots. Tom had become a squat dwarf with a long, braided orange beard. He wore black chainmail armor and had a square-shaped helmet atop his head. He had a large gut, I saw also, which overhung his belt. Brad still had his familiar facial features, but it pointed ears now and long, flowing blonde hair. He wore green leather armor, and with quick easy movements, threw the quiver over his shoulder, and picked up the bow in his hands. I grabbed the sword and found that when I looked down I was wearing gleaming white gold armor with a red cross on the breast. "Well, I guess we're all set," I said, looking into the darkness of the dungeon ahead. "Only one way to go forward." From the darkness ahead, a piercing scream shattered the silence. An echoing howl of such pain and terror that my heart skipped a beat. I felt sweat beading on my forehead suddenly. My heart began to hammer and pound in my chest, and I tried to control the fear in my voice. "Come on, guys. We got this." Stepping forward, we left the flickering glow of torches in the stairway, and were immediately swallowed up by darkness.